Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is presented this year by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The Honda CR-V has been my favorite vehicle in Honda's lineup for years because it has great gas mileage and can haul a vintage furniture find with ease. In fact, it's so easy for getting out there in general, from the beach to the mountains to even the next photo shoot for a Southern travel article. Purchasing a CR-V from Townsend Honda means purchasing from a family-owned company built on service and connection with its customers, and they want to remind you of the joys of a jaunt down the road. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Honda salutes local entrepreneurs from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. There is a magic picnic basket on this show, a fantastical idea of a dream meal, and I struggle to recount how many of my 240 plus guests have included a dish from Frank Stitt. Let's just say it's more than a few. Writer Charles Gaines in Garden and Gun called him the Godfather of Southern Cuisine, and this James Beard Award winner has built a dynasty of dining delight in Birmingham, Alabama, with Highlands Bar Grill, Chez Fonfon, and Bottega. A studious youth, he turned his philosophical eye from studying Plato to learning from Alice Waters, Simca Beck, and Richard Olney, not to mention Jeremiah Tower, but he's still as delighted at seasonal produce coming in the kitchen door as he's ever been. That enthusiasm weaves its way through his restaurants, his staff, and the dishes that are crafted. And the idea of a restaurant as revelry, as reverence, and as a respite is perhaps Stitt's true philosophy shining forth. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Frank.
Well, thanks. It's good to be here with you.
It's so nice to be back in Fonfon after enjoying a wonderful dinner. And actually, I have a lot of listeners that follow along on Instagram, and they were like, well, that was a nice place to land. Once you came into Birmingham, I ran around quickly and then had an early dinner reservation here, and I did some damage. I ate a lot. But I'm so happy to get the chance to sit with you today because I really think of you as an ambassador for Birmingham. And so I'd like to start there, and then we'll get into your own personal aesthetics. But you're an ambassador to Birmingham for me because I never really thought of Birmingham until you being a restaurant scene.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're going to talk about how experiences away from Birmingham really inform your plates here in the city. But I was at Jones Valley Teaching Farm yesterday, and
one of my favorite places.
Yes, and you and Pardis came up, and then I was at Atomic Lounge last night and sitting across from your face on the back wall. So
Faisal's great.
You've invested in this place through your work, through your profession. Can you talk about what about Birmingham and its food or its people inspire you as a creative?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's go way back. I was born in Birmingham. My dad was finishing up his surgery residency at UAB Hospital, and then grew up in North Alabama. But we would take trips to restaurants as a child growing up, to The Club and Del Cellar and Joy Young's, one of the great Cantonese restaurants of the South in its time. And so those kind of food memories of visiting restaurants and the great Greek restaurants, the Greek seafood restaurants. And so Birmingham had that culture. But when I started my interest in cooking and food and restaurants later on, coming back here in the early 80s, it was maybe not so exciting at that moment. And so for me to kind of bring an enthusiasm for local ingredients that are from farmers that care, and to emphasize Southern ingredients and traditions, that woven in with my love of France and then later Italy with Bottega, I've been able to kind of weave those cultural inspirations into our Birmingham region and create restaurants that hopefully have a spirit and a soul and a heart and an excitement and a sexiness and there's something magic about restaurants, and here in Birmingham, the people responded and have supported what we were interested in.
That idea of local really is a tenet. Sourcing locally is a tenet of my work and my show and my writing and all of those things. And so my listeners are familiar with that. What they aren't familiar with is the fact that there was a time where that was so the norm. We were just talking off mic about your grandmother's vegetable plate, and that was the norm. And then there was this period when you started where that wasn't the norm.
Right.
And so you had to build a system. Can you talk briefly about building that system, about finding your farmers? Because there is often a relationship between that farmer and that chef that really pushes both to better places, right?
I think back when in the early days, and before Pepper Place Farmers Market and before the current generation of farmers, I would go out to the Findlay Avenue Farmers Market, and there would be some farmers from Coleman, and they might be in the white pickup truck, and they had really good tomatoes. And then we'd put on the menu, this is white truck tomatoes salad. And oftentimes those farmers knew my family from Coleman, both the Stitts and the Whites. And so there was this almost a leg up with this familiarity with some of the farmers even back then. But it was similarly with, say, Greg Abrams in Panama City, who's one of the best purveyors of fresh seafood. And he was providing fresh fish to the Greek restaurants, and then we started a relationship right when we opened. And so to have this fish that was just caught, whether snapper, triggerfish, sea trout, speckled trout, mackerel, and so those kinds of relationships are what make, I think, a restaurant exciting. And that certainly provides the creative inspiration for me. It's those ingredients. I mean, today we've got porcinis coming in from this forager from 11,000 feet in Colorado. Not exactly local, but still those ingredients that are just off the chart with
and very
personality.
Specific,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Really specific from a place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that intersection of these ingredients and then your experiences, eating away from your own restaurant and your own cooking. Chefs will cook from memory. They cook to something. Sometimes chefs are cooking to something, forward thinking, or they're cooking with a sense of humor, like you'll see in tasting menus where they're trying to get you to go wow or delight. There's an aesthetic there. You mentioned that you cook from, or you're really impressionable from having food experiences. And I'm here the other night and I'm tasting these classic French dishes like trout amandine, and it's perfect. And that's hard to do. It can be too buttery. It can be too oily. It can be too dry. It's just a delicate, trout is delicate, almond flavor is delicate. There's a lot of balancing act that has to be playing there. When you go away, do you have a feeling when you're eating something that you're like, oh, I need to bring this back to my people? Does something come up that you just know?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's subconscious, but I think back on influences like the Tattich Grill in San Francisco, or Swan Oyster Depot, or Galatoire's in New Orleans, or of a dish I had at an Alain Ducasse restaurant in Paris that was just autumn vegetables with some autumn fruit in this little buttery, savory broth with it was just shockingly pure of texture and flavor and originality. But those all are experiences. I think back on, that excitement of being in Galatoire's, or that excitement of having fresh seafood at Swan Oyster Depot, where everything is just tingling fresh. And so, that's that experience that I try to recreate. And then to share some of those inspirations. We were talking about this one special at Fonfon now, this Riviera salad with these little clams and shrimp and mussels and calamari with roast peppers and Romano beans and potatoes and basil aioli and this lemony vinaigrette. And it's just this seafood salad that, I saw and had somewhere in the south of France. And then to bring that to Birmingham and to do it with our Gulf shrimp and, to try to have these green beans and peppers and potatoes that were just picked. Those things become kind of magic because they were grown with love, and hopefully there was love that went into preparing them and cooking and serving them. And so that's a big ingredient.
Yeah, it is a big ingredient, and something that I think that we learned a lot more last year when we all had to cook in our own houses. Cooking for somebody feels better. Cooking with people feels better. Serving people feels better than just clocking in. And the idea of building a restaurant, it's a feeling here. It's a feeling, at your other locations. When you are bringing somebody in, do you talk to them about the culture of this place and what you're trying to convey? Or do you think that they, at this stage, pretty much kind of know what they're getting into? I mean, because, or is it just kind of rote because they're in it? Once they're hired, they kind of just start to feel it themselves.
Well, that's kind of a tough subject because our culture and our philosophy is not something that we kind of preach about, but it's the excitement that we get and the desire to showcase an ingredient in a way that's with respect and care, and maybe there is a little originality, or maybe there's a play on a tradition. But we try to get our staff to understand that through time, through working with me, tasting and tweaking a little more acidity, a little more salt, a little more richness, a little less, text crunch here. And so those little infinite finesse details really come from on-the-job tweaking and tasting things together and saying, that ratatouille almost went a little too long, too soft. The sweet, syrupy flavors of the vegetables are great, but we've got to bring a little more texture back. And so those are things that are pretty much on the job doing that dish, getting that trout dry and just barely with a little flour, and those cast iron French steel pans super hot so that you get that golden crust. You got to listen for that to see that pan is hot enough. So it's a real, sensual, physical thing of what we do of cooking. And Pardis always tells on me about somebody to learn how to do a tomato salad. There's infinite tweaking because you've got to slice it just so, and you can't be too thick or too thin. There's one side that's going to be up. There's got to be the right amount of olive oil and which vinegar, and the basil has got to be young and tender, and the onions are from a local farmer that are unbelievably sweet, just need to be rinsed and soaked in a little ice water for a moment. And so a tomato salad, if you think it's just anybody can do it, but it seems like 1,000 details involved.
And I think the word that you used, finesse, is a really good explanation of kind of your style. And it's brave, Frank, to cook the classics, right? To lay it down here and be like, we're doing a tartare, we're doing an almondine. I had escargot, which I'm never not going to order. I love that dish. And I have to just tell you an aside, I would love to dig into that dish for a minute. And just because a lot of listeners will be like, I'm not eating snails, and it's so delicious. I want to try to get more people on it. But a few years ago, I had a column in the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina, and it was called The Lowdown. And I would kind of talk about seasonal trends and 7 places to go eat ice cream or some. And I got to play a little bit. It was a column, so I got to be me. And I was like, well, escargot, we're having a 1980s moment. We were having escargot, baked Alaska, all of those big restaurant classics are really coming back in, and Craig Deal and then Vandy Vanderwalker, they were doing these escargot, and I did an article, and the Post and Courier, I got a note. We need you to do some regular stuff, but to this day, that is my most read lowdown column. So people were fascinated by that. So that dish that finesse needs to be right? What was so good about that was the little bread
Those little tiny punched out little croutons from our homemade pain de mie bread that we make, every other day at Bottega. But also, something that's in the details, that garlic has got to be fresh and peeled and chopped. And the parsley from local farms is such a huge part of it, and the shallots and the seasoning. And, that dish takes me back to an escargot as a child being at Brennan's in New Orleans. And the waiter passed by, and this aroma, I couldn't believe how incredibly exciting and deep, and this garlic and parsley and butter and sizzling. And the table next to us was eating this, and I was asking my mom or dad, what is that? And so I think they ordered one for us to share, and from then on I just loved it. Chance to dip your bread into that little shell or that container with all of that garlicky parsley butter. Whoa! And the snail is just this exotic little wonderful texture.
It is, and it's very earthy. It's like a seafood, a land seafood, to me anyway.
Well, let me tell you another quick little story. There was one of my favorite restaurants in the south of France is the Bistrot de Perradou, which is near Les Baux, south of Avignon. And I think it was Loulou Tempier's favorite restaurant from the Domaine Tempier, Loulou Perrault. But so we were staying nearby and were able to go a few times, and there's no choice. But on Friday, they do Le Grand Aioli. And so that's a poached fish, white fish, with poached carrots and potatoes and celery and this huge mortar and pestle bowl of aioli that you serve with this. And then there's hundreds of these little snails that are served with it. And I'd never seen anything like that in this very rustic French bistro in the south of France.
And those experiences come through in the cooking. Like those memories are triggered when we're talking about this. But I know a lot of chefs listen to the show, and I know a lot of chefs admire you who listen to the show. And I was mentioning the escargot and the trout almondine and the tomato salad. These are classics, right? It's brave to go into a classic because people have an idea of what it should be. If you are cooking one of the classics, how would you suggest a cook, either a chef or a home cook, get to the soul of that classic? Because you're talking about this multi-sensory kind of cooking, and a lot of people spend a very cerebral moment when it comes to a classic. They don't get into it physically.
Yeah. Well, I think back in my culinary path of being in Berkeley at school and being drawn to Chez Fonfon, and from Chez Fonfon, the introduction to Richard Olney's writing and to Elizabeth David's writing. And it almost always has started out with me with trying to peel that onion, and you dig deeper and say, okay, well, this is an interesting restaurant. Who is their inspiration? Who were their writers that moved them? And certainly for Chez Fonfon, for Alice and Jeremiah, it was Richard Olney. And so after reading Richard Olney, I was determined I had to meet this person. And because to me, he so represented this foundation of an intellectual understanding of how cooking happens and the cultural traditions. And so, fortunately, I was able to work with him as his assistant, but still, even today, be inspired by his recipes, by his menus, by his talking about, using marjoram, fresh marjoram with scrambled eggs or whatever, a braised lamb. But those traditional French dishes, you kind of go back to a deeper understanding. And certainly he opened a lot of doors for me to the way I think about food. And I always think about, how is this going to be with wine, and how is this going to be at this time of year? And, I'm totally controlled by the seasons, and I'm most excited about what's in season right now. And I think that, again, comes from that excitement about the farm and about the market, and that's what moves me.
Sourcing part of the cooking experience. I think maybe that is something that a lot of people forget. Yeah. And that is part of the joy. Like we were just saying, I had plans to do the market this morning and did other things. Popped in another interview and ran around and tried to eat breakfast this morning and didn't successfully do that, but that's okay. I like exploring in the mornings on foot and like checking out the areas. But markets are so inspiring. Do you have, and I know this is like picking children, do you have a favorite when it comes into season that you feel is your personal favorite vegetable or ingredient?
Well, right now, I mean, we're in August, and so the Rosa Bianca eggplant, the peppers, the onions, people have kind of often don't realize how great something like an onion and these new, different heritage breed of onions varieties that are so crunchy and sweet. But when the fall comes, I'm totally, that everything changes in winter and spring. I mean, to me, the fresh asparagus is just one of the most exciting times of the year. And I remember going out to my grandmother White's, and she would choose me to help her pick asparagus, and just boiled with a little butter, it's just dreamy. And now that you are talking about Birmingham, and to think that we have one of the great farmers markets of America with the Pepper Place Farmers Market, and that's something Kathy Sloss-Jones and I started 21 years ago, and to see the next generation of farmers that are able to make a living, have a good life. I mean, people like Trent Boyd in Coleman, I think he's got 9 children that are all homeschooled, and that his tomatoes are just his Cherokee purples are just some of the best ever.
That might be my vegetable of my heart.
Yeah.
The Cherokee purple tomato.
Yeah. To me, it's kind of like 4th century Greek architecture. It's just the epitome of how it's supposed to be.
That's a great way to put it. So, there's transitions happening over at Highlands. It's currently shuttered for now, but the other ones are going, and we're kind of dealing with this lurching open and close and everything that's happening here. But you're still so excited about restaurants and cooking. What is making you hungry? What are you percolating about right now?
What's making me hungry are those peaches from Chilton County that we've just at the end of that season, and now it's the figs that we're harvesting from our farm. I mean, one of our favorite dishes is this fig dish that was inspired by Richard Olney, and with a half of a fig with a big toasted walnut wrapped in kind of fatty prosciutto, and then grilled and served with a cream that's infused with lemon and mint, and if possible a little grilled fig leaf. And so there's just this aroma of kind of a childhood memory of rustling around near a fig tree, and you get this salty bite of the prosciutto or country ham and the walnut, and it's just this perfect little bite.
And people ask me why I came to Birmingham in August. I come for the food in season, not for the heat. So they're like, why would you go further south in the summer? And we're like, this is the best time of year for eating, y'all. This is the best for me.
Yeah.
Figs, tomatoes, the fresh onions. I'm a huge fan of all varieties of alums. I love that whole category. Is there one aspect of this job as chef, cookbook author, restaurateur that really meshes like a puzzle piece with an aspect of your personality?
Well, I think that, again, it goes back to the respect for the farm, for the land. Now, to me, one of the most important things is regenerative agriculture and humane animal husbandry. And so I feel like, I have an opportunity to make a difference and to maybe steer people in a way of choosing, what's ethical, what's right. We've been on a downward path to just get the cheapest food since mid 20th century, and so I think that to try to rethink. I mean, I'm not trying to be elitist. I think beans and rice are a great thing, but I think that they need to be sourced in a way that you can feel good about, who grew them, who took care of that. And so to me, that's an extremely important part of my life right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can also grow some of that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That is a wonderful place to be, too. Is there one thing, quick fire, keeping you up at night?
Right now, Pardis is the one that sweats and worries about every detail. And, I want our staff to be healthy and protected and safe. I think that it's such a shame that more people are not getting vaccinated. To me, I think people need to be respectful and kind and gracious to others. And I'm troubled by people choosing to, what I think is just, is not being caring about others.
Well, I'm sitting here after having a wonderful meal the other night, and there's a little bit of prep happening behind us, and, it's quiet for the most part. The kitchen is active because Saturday day in a restaurant for evening service is one of my favorite just soundscapes. I love it. When the kitchen plays what they want to play, music-wise, and you can just hear prep, and it's just a wonderful place to be. But I'm hoping to be able to return the favor with my magic picnic basket. I only reserve it for Southern Fort guests. It's a dream scenario where instead of a death row meal, I bring you some foods to bring you life. So I can conscript anybody to make anything that you would like. I can source for you, and I can go back in time and get a taste that you want just one more taste of. I'd love to bring you some of your favorite things. So what can I put in the basket?
Well, to me, that kind of celebration meal, I kind of dream about having Plato de fruits de mer of oysters and shrimp and clams and whelks. And I think that we'd have to start off with that kind of seafood platter. And I would hope there might be some champagne involved. But then, I love a salad of just impeccable ingredients that's refreshing, could be very, very simple, but something of the vegetable and the best arugula or the most incredible lettuces with the great vinegar and olive oil, and a soup. The soup could be anything, but I think that when vegetables and a broth are simmered and pureed, or I think about sometimes at Harry's Bar in Venice. One time, Pardis was not feeling well, and they brought this vegetable minestrone, and it was just such a restorative thing. I love fish, and that's just such a joy for me. So some kind of fish would be good, but lamb or guinea hen would be another wish for in that little basket. We were just doing a guinea hen dish from Joyce Farms, but with some of these porcinis I was talking about, and some polenta and good Madeira. And it's something that kind of makes
so hungry right now.
Swoon.
I'm actually swooning. This is one of those. I was like, please don't let my stomach growl loud enough to be picked up by the mic. But yeah, that sounds so delicious. And I know we did not even get to all of the love for wine. And of course, I understand that pairing is paramount. But That sounds like a really good picnic basket.
Now, you haven't gotten to try this honey cake that we're doing, but it's straight from the 20th Century Cafe recipe in Oakland, but using our local burnt honey, and it's a pretty dreamy, good dessert, too.
Oh, my goodness. Well, on that note, if people want to learn more about Frank Stitt and his family of restaurants and his commitment to the Birmingham culinary scene from source to plate, if you go to thesouthernfork.com, I'll have images there. You can also click the link to find more information about the restaurants. If you are through this way and don't eat at one of them, I'm not sure we can be friends. But anyway, just kidding. I appreciate you listeners very, very much, and I wouldn't be able to do this job and continue to be inspired every time I pick up the mic if you weren't on the other side of it. So thank you, Chef, for taking time during Saturday day to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
I love talking with you. It's great being together, so thanks for being here.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. I have something very brief to share with you today, and that is the idea of allowing yourself to be delighted. Right now, things feel heavy and things are hard in our world, and there's just a lot of hurt and there's a lot of sadness. And when it comes to restaurants, also a lot of people who like to feel like an expert. They want to pick apart a dish, especially when they're sitting with me. They want to tell me what's not good about it, or say that this should have had less sauce or been served on the side. One of the best gifts I can give you is to allow the chef to delight you. Don't order things on the side. Don't substitute things. Don't decide that you don't like something in a dish, so it doesn't need to be there. Trust the chef. I was delighted at Chez Fonfon and Bottega. Many, many times in this work that I do, I am often delighted. I'm also often less than wowed, but every time I go in, I am excited to see what the chef is going to send out wet. The person that is cooking is wanting me to taste and to understand about their viewpoint. That comes from giving up control. It sounds really different from a restaurant critic's perspective. The idea of a critic is that we're going to pick apart and we're the one in control. And if you've ever left a review on Yelp, you have that sense of power, right? Actually, it feels really wonderful to say, I don't want to make decisions. Send me out what you want to send me. Directly after talking about the figs and the roasted walnuts and the prosciutto, I went to Bottega on his invitation, because why would I not say yes to a lunch invitation at Bottega? And I had that beautiful, transcendent, breathtaking fig, walnut, and prosciutto dish. And it was very simple, it was very clean, but yet at the same time, it was almost sacrilegious because I ate them all by myself. So I'm sharing that little bit of delight with you today, hearing that dish, that late summer dish, and that idea that we have to take our joy where we can get it, whether or not it is in a beautiful sunset, all of those rote cliche things, or a dish of figs, prosciutto, and walnuts. Allow yourself to be delighted, and I think you will have just a breath of relief from all the things that are heavy in this world. That's all I got. I will be right here, sitting inside my walk-in closet next time. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you gonna eat all that?